Thank you for being here. Today, I want to tell you about a really special technique that I use in my astrology practice and in my personal practice with astrology called annual perfections. This technique deeply honors the relationship that we have with each of the planets and the planetary archetypes, can deepen our knowledge of these planetary archetypes, deepen our relationship with ourselves, and help us move in a harmonious way with qualitative time. So, how does this technique work? That's what I'm going to explain in this video. And then I will have a longer series of videos up on my Patreon that you can view if you're a Patreon subscriber to know how to use this technique in your own chart. But in this video, I'm going to give you the basics of knowing how to do it and even talk about some personal anecdotes in my journey with this work. So without further ado, let's talk about annual profections. Annual profections is an ancient timing technique. Timing techniques are things that astrologers use to be able to tell when something might be more or less significant. So in working with students, I get a lot of questions about, okay, I can see all of these things happening to my chart. I can see the moon moving over my sun and I can see Mars transiting my Venus and Saturn's over here. And how do I interpret, how do I make sense of what is actually might be showing up for me in a more strong way? How do I pay attention to the important things and kind of drown out the noise? And so timing techniques are one of the ways that astrologers do that. Other timing techniques are like zodiacal releasing or secondary progressions or solar arcs. Annual perfections is an ancient timing technique which has to do with how old you are. It works with whole sign houses and traditional rulerships. So basically the idea of annual perfections is that not everything that we see in the birth chart is active all of the time. That would be an incredible amount of information and an incredible amount of things happening. So annual perfections kind of breaks down time periods for when we might expect certain promises of the birth chart, certain manifestations of natal astrology to be taking place, right? When your Mars placement might be particularly relevant to your life, or pick any planet. And it's fairly simple once you understand how it works. So basically, you release from the ascendant. And so the first year of your life is a first house year when you are age 0. And so the topics of the first house, the ruler of the first house, anything in the first house is activated during that year. And then when you turn 1, you move into a second house year. And again, we have the topics of the second house activated, the ruler of the second house, any planets in the second house, and the storylines that they're connected with. And so we go around the chart in 12-year cycles, each having an activated year. And this goes, it repeats these 12-year cycles. And so you get kind of once every 12 years, really the time to engage with the topics of each of the houses. And that's going to be just as true for you if you have an empty house, a house with no planets or not. And so it's a really beautiful way to work with the 12 houses, which are the 12 kind of archetypal realms of human experience, as explained by astrology. So I've seen this technique just work really powerfully in many people's lives. When you are 27 and having a fourth house year, almost every 27-year-old I've ever met is either moving home or moving away from home, dealing with topics of foundations and living situations and family history and what role they're going to play in that. So that's just an example, but it's true for everyone in every age kind of working through the storylines of each of the houses. Now, this technique can also help us have equilibrium in more difficult years. So there are some years, right, when we might be struggling a little bit more. There's some years where, kind of the desire of our life or what needs to happen is things need to fall apart. And so we can kind of anticipate those years, learn how to work with them, make sure that we are asking the right questions and making meaning from our struggles rather than resisting them. So that's some of the offerings that annual Profections can make. So to know which year you are in, you find your age on this chart, and you can just extend the chart if you're over 71. So you find your age on the chart. So right now I am 29. That is a 6th house profection year. And then I'm going to refer back to my natal chart. So I am an Aquarius rising. So the 6th sign from Aquarius, the ruler of my 6th house is Cancer. And the ruler of the sign of Cancer is the moon. So for my entire 29th, I guess it's technically my 30th, but for the entire time that I'm 29, the moon is what's called my annularly profected time lord, or my lord of the year. It is my time lord of the year. And so the gift that I'm given in my 29th year, in my Cancer year, is that I can touch in and connect with the lunar archetypes. And so I have a year to deepen my knowledge of the moon, everything that she offers. So, and everything that she might be referring to in my chart. So one of the ancient significations of the moon is marriage, and I got married in the last year. The moon is environment. The moon is daily ritual. The moon is our connection with our bodies. The moon is our connection with our history, our lineage, our family. So all of these topics might arise and invite me to kind of deepen my experience of them throughout this year. And so that's going to be true regardless of which planet is your lord of the year. You have the opportunity to get to know and deepen your relationship with that archetype and with that force within yourself. Because as psychological astrology posits, all of these planetary archetypes are forces within us. Now, we may have different relationships to them. Some of them might be stronger, some of them might be weaker, depending on the individual. But we all have the opportunity to be in relationship with all of them. Now we can also look at the annularly perfected house as the topic of the topics where we'll see kind of the most development, or the place that's really rich for some deep engagement and kind of renewal of that space. And so the 6th house has to do with embodiment. It has to do with daily chores, with how you treat your body, how you connect with your routines. And so it can even have to do with illness or injury. So I might expect to see all of those topics come up this year. Now, another way to look at these is, right, just as the moon is being activated as my time lord for the year, making the moon's transits more significant, right? Also, my natal moon will be activated, and I have my natal moon in the 8th house. So I would expect 8th house topics to come up as well this year, and to kind of learn in a deeper way the story that having my natal moon in the 8th tells, especially as it is relevant to its rulership of my 6th house. So here is a table of rulerships so that you can find out which planet is your ruler of the year. In future videos, I'm going to break down the topics of each house so that you can listen to the topics of each house and what might be coming up for you in that year. And then I will also break them down by planetary archetypes so you can listen to some ideas or some invitations into a deeper relationship with each of the planetary archetypes when you're on that year. Also, in all of my year ahead ongoing readings, I talk about annual profections and the year ahead, and we look in a more personalized way at all the transits that you might be having by that planet, and ways that it might be showing up, and questions that your life might be asking you. So you can refer back to this table of rulerships. And this information is pretty readily available, but you just find your age, then you find which house that is, you find which sign you have in that house. Again, using whole sign houses is how this technique works. And then you find the ruler of that sign to know who your annularly perfected Time Lord is and whose tutelage you are under for this year. So there's 3 things that come up, and I've kind of talked about them in an integrated way in giving examples with the chart, but I really want to make them very clear as we go ahead and talk about annual perfections. And also it's more helpful for you trying to interpret your own chart. So the way that annual perfections activate your chart, and by activate, they kind of bring it alive. They bring the action to that space. So we're going to be looking for 3 things. And when I am doing readings for people, I'm checking in with 3 things. So we will have any planets in that house. So anything you have in that house natally will be activated. So I talked about the moon being the Lord of the year. So the moon is activated because it's the ruler of that house, but anything else in that house is going to be activated as well. So for me, the only thing in my 6th house is my south node. And south nodes can invite us to shed the excess, to kind of get to bare bones. It can look like not a lot is happening when we have the year with our south node. It can be deeper, it can be more spiritualized, it can be a more ethereal journey than maybe a concrete one. And so that's just one of the things that I might expect to find in that house. I might also expect to see revisiting of the stories of my south node. And I think being really active in how you are working with your nodal story and how you are transforming your nodal story and wrestling with these feelings of what you have to be in the world and what you're destined to be, and where all of that comes from and how to work with it is really potent. So we have any planets, any placements in the perfected house. So if it's an angular house, if it's your 1st house, you'll also be working with the angles. So working with the topics of the ascendant and so on. The Lord of the Year's natal position and potential in the birth chart. So, right, if my moon is the Lord of the year, even if my moon is not in Cancer, for everyone who doesn't have a Cancer moon, the moon is going to be in a different house in the chart during your lunar year. So the things that the moon in the 8th house might represent, the moon in Virgo, as I have it, might represent, we can also anticipate to see, to gain a deeper relationship and feel that as more pressing throughout the year. And then finally, we are going to be looking at transits. So kind of twofold. So the moon as my Lord of the year, the lunar transits become more significant. So I might expect to be much more affected by new moons and full moons, much more affected by eclipses. I might be able to feel more as the moon moves through the different signs in my chart. And then we're also going to look at transits in the profected house. So if the 6th house is my profected house for the year, I'm going, and I have Cancer there, any planets that are moving through Cancer, anything that's happening in Cancer might affect me more than it would normally. And so I can kind of anticipate that, when all the personal planets, when the sun and the moon and the fast moving planets, Venus and Mercury and sometimes Mars, if they're all piling up in your annually profected house, then right, that signifies a more potent time of year. Especially if you have an annually perfected planet in a slower moving planet. So if Saturn is your Lord of the Year and Saturn is in his own house, that is almost even more significant, right? And so we can kind of anticipate the volume, so to speak, that these transits are going to reverberate through our lives with. So I hope this is some basic knowledge for you to be able to access the technique of annual perfections. It is so rich and so magical, and I think really provides the container for a deep personal experience of working with these planets in your own chart and developing a personal relationship with the archetypes and with how they manifest in your chart. So I'm going to speak a little bit from a personal space of what my lunar journey has been like, just as an example. So thank you for watching this. And like I said, all of these additional videos will be available to my Patreon subscribers, and I will be releasing them over the next couple of weeks. So in my lunar year, when I entered my lunar year in September of 2020, I had just become a mother 6 weeks before. I had my first baby. I was just kind of coming into being in my new body and my new role as a mother, in my work of breastfeeding and nourishing my child, being kind of the center of my home. Obviously, becoming a new mom changes all of your routines, changes the way that you interact with your environment, changes the way that you experience time and schedules and chores and your work in the world and your connection with other people. And so that being my lunar year, I think added depth to that experience. Without even realizing it, I was invited to speak at a conference, and what I felt like what was really important to speak about was finding kind of our home and our work in the world through the placement of our natal moon. And so I gave this lecture about the moon, and then that became my introductory astrology course that I designed all around the moon to give you a core foundation of the moon and your relationship with the moon to build your relationship with the other planets from there. And so that is my intro to astrology course that kind of came into being during my lunar year. Then that became a bi-monthly discussion group focused around the new and full moons. I started releasing videos on YouTube every new and full moon, really kind of honoring the moons. And I noticed how, in a more personal way, how the charts of the new moons and the full moons had kind of lasting flavors over the next 2 weeks. I processed also, right, just as I was becoming a mother, my mother became a grandmother, my grandmother passed away, and there was this huge kind of trading of roles, this kind of relay of the generations that welcomed us into a new lunar space of feeling our roles in the world within our family. Then, let's see. Then finally, what I came to was thinking a lot about my experience of time in astrology and my work in time and astrology and what I offer. And what has become really important is kind of the creation of an atmosphere, the creation of a space that invites people in to experience what I call qualitative time. That is, right, not just time as a blank slate, that we are more or less productive in, that we have things to do, and hopefully we stuff them all in and we squeeze everything in, but really time, time that invites us to different ways of experiencing it, right? So sometimes, we've all had the experience of time moving very slow or very fast, or feeling creative or feeling stuck, right? And acknowledging that time itself as a qualitative property is a way to allow ourselves and give ourselves permission to truly experience what we're experiencing. And so my lunar year is culminating in this talk that I'm giving at the very end of my lunar year on the very last day on the Virgo new moon, that's an invitation into kind of a feminine model for the lunar cycle. So I spend a lot of time thinking about, writing about, feeling into the different phases of the moon. And I have questions about why we structure the lunar cycle in the way that we do, in the 4-quarter system. And so in this talk, that's partially a talk, partially a performance piece, partially a guided meditation for participants, there's an invitation into a deeper mythic time, into a river that flows underground in our experience, that pulls us into form, through form, out of form, that we can rest in the current and not rely, not solely take responsibility for moving ourselves forward in time. And so that feels like my gift to the moon in a year of apprenticeship to her archetype. And then I will enter my solar year and we'll see what happens there. I'm excited. So check out these other videos. Let me know how annual perfections show up in your life. I'd love to hear about who is your kind of patron planet, who is your MVP of the year, who's your Lord of the year, what are you learning about your relationship with them and how they move through the world and what they have to teach you if you spend some quiet, intentional time with them during this year. Okay, thank you very much. If you're interested in the future videos, you can click the link in the description of this video to be taken to my Patreon page, where they are all there. Okay, be well.